fear that God uses to test the validity of someone's confession of faith is the fire all throughout your life. You are going to be put into tests. And most of those tests are going to be fire that God uses to demonstrate to you the validity of your faith. The disciples were tested by God to make sure they not only believed in Him, but that they trusted Him. So friends, those of you who are older could probably come up here and preach some of this sermon yourselves. Those of you who have been walking with Jesus for 50 years, you can testify. In order to grow my faith, God has had to test me. He's had to bring me through times when I was scared and when He asked me to take a risk and step out of my comfort zone onto uncharted territory, and it's in those moments where I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. That's when God grew my faith. That, my friends, is the point of this episode in John chapter 6. And so this morning, we're going to look at why God tests people, how God tests people, and what He has to teach us through it. So all I'm going to do is give you two simple points, two observations from this text. Jesus has mastery over the sea, mastery over nature, and He has mastery over you. So follow with me in these 2 points. Point number 1. Jesus commands mastery over the sea. And when I say the sea, I mean all of nature. Okay? Here's what I'm going to show you, and you're going to need to follow my logic along through this, okay? In times of testing, Jesus, this is so crucial, Jesus is the architect of every test that you will ever endure. Jesus is the one who plans the storms that test you. Follow my logic. Let's look at John 6 and Matthew 14, starting with John 6. When evening came, His disciples went down to the sea, got into a boat, and started across the sea to Capernaum. It was now dark, and Jesus had not yet come to them. Time out. I know we got some fishermen here. I know we got some people who have boats. When you go out on the boat, if you go out at nighttime, you know it can get a little scary out there, can't it? You don't know what's underneath. So picture this. It's dark. And not only is it dark, but there's a storm brewing. There's something happening here that is beginning to create an environment of fear. Keep reading. The sea became rough because a strong wind was blowing. If you know anything about that region, storms were very common, still to this day, especially in this area. When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, you might want to underline that so when somebody comes to you as a skeptic, this is going to be important. I'll tell you why. 3 or 4 miles they were out. They saw Jesus walking on the sea and coming near the boat, and they were frightened. Have a quick look at Matthew 14 to see a few details that are there. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat. I'm accentuating that for a reason. Stick with me. And go on ahead of Him to the other side while He dismissed the crowd. He wants everybody out of there. After sending them home, He went up into the hills by Himself. Matthew's making sure we understand something here. He's by Himself to pray. Night fell while He was there alone. Matthew's helping to create something in your mind as you're reading. Jesus seems to be setting up a situation like an architect sets up a learning lesson. He's preparing them to go out into the water, and He's like, I'll catch up with you later. Why? He purposefully wants them out there. He wants them in the middle of the dark. He wants them alone. He wants the storm because He's going to show them how trustworthy He is. Jesus, the master architect of this whole scenario, is planning this from the beginning. Keep reading. But the boat was already a long distance from the land, you liberal scholars, battered by the waves, for the wind was contrary. And in the 4th watch of the night, right in your margin, 3 a.m. to 6 a.m., in the 4th watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, and they said, "It's a ghost!" They cried out in fear, but immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take courage, it is I, do not be afraid." Jesus used storms, real physical storms. We get some doozies here on the island. If you live in Florida, you get even bigger doozies. Jesus intends for you to look at a real physical storm, a tornado, a whirlwind, a hurricane, and he intends for you to look at those as metaphors for the chaotic storms that come into your heart and into your mind. And Jesus himself used this as a metaphor. You know what's the most common metaphor? Even non-believers that I know, if I say to them, the storms of life, they all know what that means, but they don't know that Jesus was the first to use it. He gives a metaphor for your life, and here it is on the screen. He says, "Everyone who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house." He's really talking about your life. Who built their life, their house, on the rock. The rain fell, the floods came, the winds blew and beat on that life. But it didn't fall. That life didn't fall apart. Why not? Because it had been founded on the rock. Notice the metaphor of the storms here. Everyone who hears these words of mine and doesn't do them, well, they're like a foolish person. They built their house on the sand. Storms come and look. Rain fell, floods came, winds blew, beat on that life. And their life fell apart. Great was the fall of it. So Jesus was the very first one to say, look, storms, yeah, they're real, but they're actually metaphors for things that are going to come into your life. Real storms are intended by Jesus to be seen as symbolic of times when the integrity of the house of your life of faith is going to be tested. Here's the point of all this. I told you to follow my logic. I was going somewhere. When a storm comes, I imagine some of you are probably going through one of those storms right now, and you feel like, my goodness, every single day I wake up and it feels like the wind just keeps pounding and pounding and pounding and pounding on me. We all go through those seasons. When that happens, there is only one way your house is going to remain standing. Here it is. Listen to me. You have to know who it is that is the architect of that storm. If you think that Jesus didn't create this is just happening arbitrarily, this is beyond his control, you're never, ever going to survive that storm, with your faith intact anyway. Jesus is the architect of the tests of your life. Psalm 66, "For you, God, tested us. You refined us like silver." Do you see what testing does? It refines your faith. Proverbs 17, "The crucible for silver and the furnace for gold." Say this with me. "But the Lord tests the heart." Listen, I could go on and on and on and on and on and on and on. If you believe that the storms that come into your life to test your faith are arbitrary, you will not survive. But if you say, no, this is hard. This is hard and this hurts and it's painful, but I know the architect who writes the tests and he loves me. If you know he loves you and he wrote the storm and that he also promises a way of escape, when the tests come, I will also provide a way of escape. You can say, no matter how long this lasts, even if it lasts 40 years, I know the one who wrote this and I trust him. That's the point of tests. The knowledge that he commands the sea was supposed to lead them to the next logical conclusion. If he commands the sea, he can command what, church? Me. That's the point. Point number 2, our last one for today. Jesus commands mastery over me. Here's what I'm going to show you. In times of fear, the whole purpose of the test is that you would learn to trust his authority over your life. Friends, listen to me. Faith untested cannot be trusted. Faith untested cannot be trusted. And so Peter especially needs to have his faith tested. So now we get to Matthew 14, where Jesus has this exchange with Peter. Matthew 14, 27 through 23. Immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take courage, it is I," or "I am, do not be afraid." Peter said to him, "Lord," or Yahweh, "if it's really you, God, command me to come to you on the water." And he said to him, "Come." Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came toward Jesus. Can you time out for just a minute? There's a connection between Jesus and Peter happening here. I want you to imagine the eye contact that's happening. This is absolutely critical. Peter sees Jesus. "Lord, if it's really you," wind is coming, rain is coming. "Lord, if it's really you, command me and I'll come." He makes eye contact and he says, "Peter, come." Peter's looking at Jesus and he steps out of the boat and he keeps his eyes fixed on Jesus. And in that moment, it's almost like a connection, like a dance that's happening. And there's a harmony that's happening between Jesus as he's still on the water and now Peter, who's also on the water. Okay? And if something comes in between, this connection between Jesus and Peter, what's going to happen to Peter? Okay? Keep reading what happens. But seeing the wind, his eyes are connected with Jesus, and suddenly, all of a sudden, I'm watching you, Jesus, and then all of a sudden he did this. Suddenly there's a competition. A new master has suddenly entered in. Peter sees the wind, and he became frightened, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and took hold of him and said to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind stopped. And those who were in the boat worshiped him, saying, "You are certainly God's Son." The authority that Jesus stands in opposition to is this competing master of fear over the life of Peter. Paul reminded Timothy about this battle for control, the competition between two masters, and he said this: God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity, but of power, love, and self-control. It's a choice. Two masters want your attention: fear and the power that Jesus offers, that you have access to through faith. When the disciples were in that boat, their life was in jeopardy, and so they feared death. Jesus answers and reassures them by telling them, I am the one who controls everything. He is the one who spoke to David, who wrote this: "Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be." In other words, death doesn't come to me without your say-so. All the days of my life were written before there was one. He said the same thing to Job. A person's days are determined. You have decreed the number of his months and have set limits he cannot exceed. And Jesus is the one whom John heard say this. Take a look. I am the living one. I was dead, and now look, I am alive forever and ever. And I hold the keys of death and Hades. No one sneaks into death accidentally. If you think they do, Jesus must have lost his keys that day. Either he holds the keys to death or he doesn't. Either he is the one who has mastery over the sea, and he is the one who has mastery over me, or he has mastery over nothing. He is in total and complete control of your life. This is how you can sleep well at night, knowing that nothing will happen to me that my master who loves me has not planned for me. And I know that even when hard things come, he will take even hard things and work them together for his good, for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. So trust him. So knowing that storms are on the horizon, church, knowing that storms are on the horizon, knowing that you will continue to experience trials and tests of your faith in order that you may be mature in your faith, you have a choice. Will you listen to the whispers of fear and doubt in your ear like Peter did? Or will you listen to the truth of the power of Jesus over your life? Hey friends, thank you so much for watching. I'm Pastor Luke with Island Bible Church.
please remember to hit the subscribe button below and to check out our whole YouTube channel. And if you're interested, you can also find more videos and the full-length sermons on our website, hopeoflbi.com. Until next time, go in the grace and peace of our Lord Jesus Christ.